Isabel and I were having a great time. So, all right, so this is part of a series that I promise will go better next month, a monthly series where we're going to cover topics that can have an impact on your life, that can help you get more done in less time, help you accomplish more, help you live your best life. And we're calling it the Greatness in the Moment series. And today's topic is productive routines. And so we want to talk about habits and routines, how they differ, why you need routines, what it takes to create a productive routine, and how to maintain it. And so Michael and I are going to tag team this, assuming the technology continues to work for us. But, you know, when I think about my own life and I think about other successful people I know, you know, they have some habits. And I've experienced the benefit of habits as you have, right? There are things that you do habitually that are productive. Sometimes you've got some habits that maybe aren't so productive, but that's a whole nother topic. We're going to focus on kind of the productive habits. And, you know, they make a difference. In fact, there's a lot of really successful people and wise people that have talked about the power of habits. Warren Buffett said this, he said, chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. Think about that one. Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And then I think it was John Dryden said, we first make our habits, then our habits make us. And so clearly habits are powerful. But one of the things, if I'm being honest with you, one of the things that's happened to me is I've identified some actions or some tasks in my business and even in my personal life that really drive my success and the things I'm after. And I've said to myself, I got to make this a habit. I got to habitize these. I don't even think that's a word, Michael, but we're going to use it. I got to turn these things into habit. And I went on trying to make those tasks habits, and it never happened. And I got really frustrated with it. I got kind of discouraged with it. And I thought to myself, what's wrong with me? You know, what the heck? Because wasn't it Maxwell Maltz years ago who said, if you do something for 21 days, it becomes habit? And so I just did these things for 21 days, 31 days, 41 days. And all of a sudden, I stopped doing it. And so I realized it wasn't a habit. And what was wrong with me that I couldn't create this habit when everybody said, hey, if you follow this pattern, you can create habits. I mean, I've read everything you can read on habits. And so Michael and I have been talking about this topic now for the last few months, kind of sorting it through and really excited to share. But I don't know if that's ever happened to you as well, that you had this activity, if you will, maybe in your personal life around your fitness or health or your relationships, or maybe in your business or your career that you said, boy, if I can make this a habit, that'll be so great, right? It just goes on autopilot and Zoom, and everything is wonderful. And that's the power of habits. I'm going to give you the definition of habit. You're going to write this down. So a habit is defined as an acquired mode of behavior that has become virtually involuntary. A mode of behavior that's become virtually involuntary. In other words, there's no conscious thought. It just happens. And so think about that. If you could take some of these key activities in your business, your personal life, and create a habit where they just happen, how powerful is that? How exciting is that? But like me, if you've tried that, you've probably experienced these times when it just doesn't happen. And you're left feeling discouraged, and you're left wondering what to do. What do I do now? I really can't abandon this action because it's key to my success, and yet, try as I may, I can't make it a habit. So what do we do, Michael? What do we do with actions that we can't make habits? First off, why is that? I mean, so what do we do with that? We've got these actions that we're like, boy, if I could just, I want to do this on a regular basis. If I can, it'll improve my performance, but I struggle to turn it into a habit. What do we do with that?
Well, I think we're going to talk about that because we're talking today about habits and routines. And I think when you can't really make a habit out of a positive behavior, you still need to make a routine out of it, because the routine helps you be more productive. It takes energy to run a routine, but you can always get more energy out of the routine. And so while we may not be able to make habits of everything, we can make routines. And so some routines can become habits, but not all routines become habits. Sometimes you just have to be willing to put in the effort to drive the routine.
Yeah, and so one of the keys, and oops, wrong screen. One of the keys here, as we think about routines, is a routine is defined as a sequence of actions regularly followed, a fixed program. You notice it's not habitual. It's not involuntary. And so one of the things that's true is that some tasks can become habits, some can't, as you've experienced, as I've just talked through my experience with that. The difference is the difficulty of the task. If the task is easy, it can become a habit. And that's why you'll see some tasks become habit for one person and not for another. Why? Because this person, when they do it, they find it almost effortless. This person, not so much. And there are certain tasks for everyone, I must virtually say for virtually everyone, that will never become habits because they're just easier to not do than they are to do. Is that making sense? Think about that. That's the difference between a habit and a routine. A habit is involuntary. It's almost unconscious. It's autopilot. A routine is something the task is difficult enough that each time I have to choose it. I give an example. I've worked out my whole life. I started working out at 15. I'm 61 now. I don't know how many days that is, but it's a lot more than 21 days. You know, it's 15, 20,000 days or something like that. Do the math. But I can tell you it's not a habit. People look at me and go, oh, he's got the habit of working out. But I know it's not a habit. You know why? Because I got to choose to do it. And there's times when I decide I choose not to do it. And there's been periods where I haven't been consistent with it. And I've been doing it forever. I mean, that's a long time. And it's still not a habit. And so the realization that some tasks, some of the critical tasks that are going to drive your success in your business and your personal life are never going to become habits. And as you try and make that a habit, you're just going to find that frustrating and ultimately unproductive. What we want to do is talk about how we turn those into routines. And routines are the kissing cousin of habits, but they'll never be involuntary. So you have to have the right mindset with that. You have to understand that you're going to have to choose to do these, but how you set yourself up and how you structure that routine makes choosing it a little bit easier than not choosing it, if that makes sense. And it's these routines, I think, more than habits that really drive success, because the things that really drive success in life are not easy. Most of them aren't. Right? As we've talked about before, anything worthwhile takes effort. And so if there's effort involved, if there's some difficulty involved, if there's some uncertainty, some anxiety, some fear, right, that's not going to be involuntary. You're going to have to consciously choose to do that. And that's why routines. And so what we want to focus on in our training today is really helping you understand the value of routines, how to create routines, how to maintain routines. And we're going to give you 6 specific routines that really drive high performance and want you to consider, if you don't have them already adopted into your practice, that you do that. Okay, so as we get into that, I want to make sure you caught that though, because the distinction is critical and it's really important, because if we go along thinking we can turn these difficult tasks, whether it be writing, if I'm a writer, or whether it be prospecting, getting on the phone and calling if I'm in sales, or working out on the physical side, or whatever it may be, thinking that I'm going to turn those into habits that I don't have to think about, that are going to be autopilot, is just, it's unproductive and it's frustrating. So, but we can turn those into routines. And so we want to talk about that. Mike, anything you want to add there before we jump into the value of routines?
So the value, the reason habits happen, I believe, is because the action itself, it becomes addictive to some degree. It's also easy to take, and there's really not a lot of cost to it. So one of the things we were reading about when we were preparing for this was the gentleman who was talking about how he had a habit of turning on the light when he walked into a room. The light burned out, but he still had the habit of flipping on the light switch. Very low effort, benefit of turning on the light, right? So habits become habits because they're easy and there's a big payoff. Routines, though, like you were saying before, the routine actions are never going to become super easy. It's always going to be easier not to do those routines. The low energy thing to do is to not do the routine. But there's some things that you can do, and we're going to talk about that, to really lower the cost of the routine. And that's what routines, in my view, really help people with, is that they lower the investment of effort. You don't have to put as much effort out because you get used to something and you get more familiar with it, and the cost of taking the action is reduced. In fact, you could even reframe your thinking around the action you take because you know the benefits of it, and you begin to look at an uncomfortable action as actually a good thing, a positive feeling to get it done. And so there's some mental games you can play with yourself, but ultimately, routines always take more energy than just not doing them. So that's why they don't turn into habits, in my view.
So let's talk about the value of routines. And there's a number of them here. The first is this realization that, look, that we've already talked about, some tasks are never going to become habits. And so if they're really important to your success, what we want to do is create a routine, because a routine still takes less discipline, less effort than if I don't have a routine. And so one of the values of routines is you can take these tasks that you really can't turn into a habit, but you can turn them into routine, which increases the probability that you're going to do it, which leads to the second benefit there, which is with routines, you create more consistency around these key actions that really drive results. So you get more consistent action. Ultimately, you get more consistent results in that way. And the talk about the results, Mike, because I've already touched on that. The consistency drives results, but there's momentum built in that as well. And there's, some key benefits with routines.
Well, you want to create a routine around something productive, right? You don't just build routines to build routines. You're actually looking to create some kind of a bump in results, a bump in positive actions, and therefore a bump in results. And so a routine, while it isn't a habit, becomes more part of your day, more part of your kind of normal cycle. So a routine is designed to create positive results by its very nature, and it becomes part of your day. It becomes, you have this like mental memory of that routine, and this is where I plug it in. This is what happens when I do it. So I think that's really the answer to your question, Brian, is that the benefits of a routine is it improves results. Plus, when you have a routine, one of the things I like about a routine is I have my routines written down, and I execute those routines pretty consistently. And one of the things I like about the routine is I'm always looking at that routine and say, this isn't working really well for me. So how do I adjust this routine to improve the results? So the way that we structure the routine allows us to kind of see it and tweak it, which I think is the foundation of deliberate practice. So routines improve results because they help us get better. They help us to improve the routine as we're executing it. And I really like that. The other thing about a routine is that I learned to be flexible, because you have this mindset about what you want to get done, right? And you're going to get interrupted. You're going to, with all things going on with people working from home, kids interrupting. We know all that story is getting to become old hat. But ultimately, being able to have a routine allows you to be flexible, because the process. You may get interrupted, but you can go right back to where you were and get back on track. And so that's the power of routine. It helps to keep you focused, creates better results, and it's a learning tool as well.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I really think routines are the key to success, to maintaining the success, to taking it to the next level. And as you reach certain levels of success, you'll adapt your routines. You'll create new routines, because there's new tasks and there's new things required of getting to the next level from there even. So as you learn to build routines and create routines, I think it's powerful as you move forward, because you'll come back to that. And most of the things that are going to drive your success in life are going to be really hard to create a habit around. Now, you may start a routine, and for you, it becomes a habit. As we talked about earlier, Michael touched on it. All habits started as routines, but not all routines turn into habits. So you just never know. But leaning on those routines really drives the consistency and ultimately the results you're after in every area of your life. So we're going to talk about some routines later, specifically business routines, work routines, and personal routines. Kick-ass beard, Michael. That's the comment you got there.
I was going to tell you if you didn't read that. So
there you go. Yeah. All right. All right. So let's talk about the routines, the mental aspect of routines, the physical aspect of routines. Mike, I'll let you jump on that.
All right, so every routine has got a component that's mental and a component that's physical. Although some routines are completely mental, and some routines though that are physical have a mental component to it. And so for me, I guess the best way to talk about that is as an example. I've got a routine in the morning, and somebody talked about the 5 a.m. club. I get up at 4 a.m. and the reason I get up at 4 a.m. is because there's a block of time between 4 and 8 when Brian doesn't, I'm not kidding, but I just don't get any phone calls. I have my time to do what I need to do. And so Brian and I are writing another book. That's perfect time for me to work on the book without phone calls. So I have this routine to get up at 4 a.m. And that routine is first a mental routine, because before I get up in the morning, the night before, I've got to mentally decide to get up at 4, because I don't like getting out of bed at 4 o'clock. I mean, that's not something that I do just because it's fun to do. In fact, it's kind of a pain. So that mental routine starts with the night before making the choice, so that in 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm not deciding to hit snooze and making a different choice, right? I've already made the choice. Now I could still hit the snooze, but the point is that I don't give myself that out. And so I get up. Right. And that first thing that I do is I put my feet on the floor. As soon as I feel my feet on the floor, I say, yeah, I did it another day. Right. Say a quick prayer and I'm on my way. So that mental part then kicks into my physical routine. And I've got this routine now where I'm in and out of the bathroom in a certain 15 minutes. I'm cooking breakfast, making coffee. By 4:30, I could go to work, or I could start my workout routine, which I kind of go back and forth on. So but that morning routine stays the same. So that mental part feeds the physical part. Without the mental part, I'd struggle to do the physical part.
Yeah, and so there's those two aspects, and you have to be mindful of both of those and recognize. I think for me, the bigger struggle is on the mental side of the routines. It's, once I get into it, it's never a big deal. It's never as hard as I thought it was, but it's really getting my head in the place where it says, okay, I'm gonna engage the routine. I'm gonna engage it consistently. And I'm gonna commit to it. And so I think it's important to understand there are those two aspects to almost any routine, even the real physical routines, the working out routine, right? There's this mental component to that, getting into the gym, showing up when you need to show up, giving it your best. All of that stuff is so much between the ears. And
absolutely. But if I could just throw something out, somebody mentioned a routine called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mental routine. I forgot who said that, but basically she said that if you don't want to do something, and it's time to do it, you don't give yourself the out. You just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Right. So it's just a mental routine to go through. Mel Robbins, that's the name of the person. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So let's talk then about productive routines and the different areas that we want to kind of focus on as we think about where we might put in some routines for us. And the first is mental and emotional health. Right? What are you doing? What routines do you have to manage your mental and emotional health, to keep you positive, to keep the right stuff in your head, to keep you from being overcome with all the stuff that takes you down, whether it be the news and the media or other things around you, right? There's all kinds of things out there that want to pollute our thinking day in and day out. And as you've worked with us before, we're big on the framework that thinking drives actions, creates results. And so how you're thinking, really your mindset is everything. And so what routines do you have to make sure you have a positive, productive mindset? Because I believe that it just doesn't happen on its own. It might for a few people, but most of us, we've got to be intentional with that. It's a little bit like the farmer's field. If the farmer leaves the field and doesn't work the field, you never see a bumper crop. What you get is weeds. And I believe it's the same with our mental and our emotional health. If we're not intentional about feeding that positively and growing that and nurturing that, then what we get is weeds. And so we're going to talk about some routines around that, how you start your day, how you end your day, how you manage what you focus on, what you spend energy on, what you think about, because it really matters. And not only at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, but throughout the day. And so I want you to begin to think about, what routines do you have right now? Are they positive? Are they productive? Are they helping you get to where you want to go, or not so much? Okay. A second one would be work. What are your routines at work? How do you start your work day? How do you go through your day? Right? Is your routine one where you just take the day as it comes? Or do you have an intentional routine of how you go through the day? Again, all this stuff matters, and it's not about boxing you in. It's really about creating structures that you can lean on that create freedom for you and allow for creativity and allow for the joy that comes with that. But what are the routines you have at work, and are they productive? What are some of the routines maybe you fall into at work that are unproductive, that are getting in the way of you being effective, that are getting in the way of you accomplishing really what you're capable of? Maybe you got some routines that, you're glued to that inbox. Well, that's going to be frustrating. Not only is that unproductive, it's going to be frustrating. and you're going to go home exhausted, having not moved the needle. Physical health. You know, so much of the mind's tied to the body. It's one, right? You've seen the research that shows if physically you're active, your mind's more sharp. And so what are you doing? What physical routines do you have? Is your physical routine to flop on the couch with a soda and Doritos, or do you have a more productive routine than that? And are you intentional with it? Right. So some of these routines we built just unintentionally, and they're probably not as productive as they could be. So we want to look at your routines physically. What are you doing to stay healthy, to stay vibrant, to create energy so that you have the energy you need to be with family and to create the success and the impact you want to have? Our relationships, Mike, you want to talk about the next two, that one and mindfulness?
Jump back. I'll cover relationships, but I just want to jump back to what you said about Doritos and pop. That's typically a habit. It's not a routine, right? It's easy to fall into a habit. Get home, I'm tired, grab a snack, grab a pop, sit down in front of television, get on my phone. And so what you're doing in there is you're competing with a habit, and you're trying to install a routine, right? And it's just kind of being aware of where we kind of gravitate and what's productive. And making the productive choice is hard to do, but that's where routines become so powerful, because they're kind of a crutch you can lean on to get through that stuff. So with relationships, you know, it's like anything else. These are just areas of our lives that we feel like if you're out of control, you're not aligned, it's going to drain energy away from your ability to be effective in other areas of your life, right? So we're one person. We're not a business person. We're not a private person. We're both of those things. And so if any area of our life is an area that we'd like to have better results in, relationships are a great area for that, because if our relationships are out of control, very often it makes it difficult for us to do our best, apply our best, to be original and creative in what we do in other areas of our lives. So with relationships, it's really identifying what relationships do you have in your life that are important to you, and really where are those relationships and where could they get better? And once you've identified that, really thinking through what are some of the routines that I could apply in this relationship to make it more effective. Now, it's a little dangerous, because if you tell your partner or your kid that, hey, I'm going to try to build a relationship with you through use of routines, it's probably not the way to lead with that. But at the same time, it might not be. I found out that it's not a good, I can testify to that. But the point is that, you know, what are the actions you can do that would really do the most to build a consistent relationship, right? Maybe it's date night with your spouse once a week. Maybe it's playtime with the kids every day at a certain time. You're available to them. But those routines become important in building up powerful relationships, just like other areas of your life. So, you know, think about where you're out of alignment, and really that might be a great area to apply a routine.
Yeah, you know, I think just to give an example, right? Sometimes you can build a routine that addresses a couple of these. So my oldest daughter is 22. She's a junior at Michigan State University, which is just down the road from us. And so we've built a routine about working out together, and we work out 4 days a week together. And so it's a great routine. It gets the physical, right? And it also gets my relationship here. We have time, just her and I in the gym for an hour, 90 minutes, 4 days a week. We're joking, we're having fun, we're getting healthy, we're getting fit. And so as you think about these routines, oftentimes you can kind of create a routine that addresses a couple areas. And I think those are really powerful when you can do that. What about mindfulness and spirituality? Did you catch that? I didn't hear you talk much about that.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
I was noticing that Chris Johnson's getting some great shout outs on the chat. So just thought I'd throw that out to you, let you know. In terms of his health and so on. Mental health and emotional health. You know, one of the things that I feel is important is for us to kind of be mentally present and mentally sharp. And it's so easy for us, the way that we think affects the way we behave, which creates the results that we experience in life, right? So I like to ask my clients, is the belief that your beliefs are true? And you can figure that out later. But my point is that we have a lot of beliefs that we believe about the way the world works that aren't necessarily productive. And so one of the things that when we talk about mental and emotional health is really having a routine to do some things that can really build that up. So you know, visualizing times in your life when you've been happy, you know, spending time and bringing to mind 6 or 7 different times in your life when you've been happy, carving out some time to do that. mindfulness, being able to kind of center yourself, deep breathing exercises, some of the things that you can do to kind of slow your heart rate and kind of slow your breathing allows you to kind of bring yourself back to the moment, right? That mindfulness and that kind of gratefulness and that process of having routines to build in, a more balanced and a more realistic view of the world. Because when we just wake up in the morning and we're stressed out about all the things we've got to get done and we didn't get done yesterday, I mean, that can get pretty negative, get pretty difficult to work through that. So carving out routines to kind of center yourself, becoming more closely in touch with what most matters to you, and kind of the gratefulness that we all can have if we think about it, really helps to center us and give us that extra boost, that extra mental edge during the day. So that's what I'd say about that, Brian. I don't know if you'd add anything to that or not, but that's what I was
No,
thinking.
so these are key areas, and we're not suggesting, hey, if you don't have any of these routines built, let's go build them all right now in all these areas. We're all about less is more. Let's take one thing at a time kind of thing. But I just want to kind of give you the landscape of where you might think about installing some routines. One person, not exactly sure how to pronounce the name, Paula, said, I take my medication every day without skipping it, but sometimes I skip my yoga. Right? There's a great example of a difference between an easy task that can become habit and a more challenging task that has to be a routine. Because doing the yoga, it's always easier probably not to do it than it is to do it. With the medication, it's just boom.
It was meditation, Brian, not medication.
Meditation, okay. Well, I'm thinking of medication.
Yeah, I have a routine that involves bourbon in the afternoon, so that's that actually turns.
That's a good clarification. Same thing though, right? There's some things that become habits. So for you, the meditation is something that comes easy. It's really enjoyable. It's not hard to get into. It's easy to start. It's easy to continue. And so it sounds like that's a habit for you. Where for someone else, meditation may not be a habit. And for you to have created a habit, it had to start as a routine. So again, really focusing on the routine. Some of them will become habit. The more difficult tasks, though, will always probably have to stay a routine. Okay, so let's transition then, Mike. Let's talk a little bit about how to create a productive routine in general, and then we'll go into 6 routines that we really think you guys should think about. They're high performance routines, the routines that most successful people have installed at some phase of their life in some form or fashion. But I want to first talk about how do we create a routine, because there's a lot of stuff with habits about creating a cue, rewards, and that kind of thing. Routines are a little different than that. But there's a pretty straightforward process of how you create a routine. The first is the right mindset. And it starts with this realization that we already talked about, that some tasks can never become a habit. And it's always going to be easier not to do this task or this series of tasks, whatever the routine consists of, than it will be to do it. And so if my mindset isn't that, if my mindset is, boy, I'm going to get this thing as just automatic, I'm not going to stick with it. Because at some point in the not too distant future, I'm going to have a day when it's not automatic, and I'm going to be surprised by that. So the right mindset is really important, that you understand that these routines are things that you're never going to put them on autopilot, because the minute you think you're on autopilot is when you stop doing them. So it's a choice you're going to have to make every time it's time to engage with that routine. And then as you get into it, typically you start to build some momentum with it. But again, unless it becomes a habit for you, it's not going to be an autopilot thing. Anything you add to that, Mike?
Yeah, as you were talking, we used to do a lot of training around commitments. It's still part of the principles of the 12-week year, but commitments are things that we commit to, but typically they're not easy to do. And so that's why we commit to them, right? And one of the benefits of keeping commitments is that they can create great results in our lives, just like routines. And sometimes you're committing to a routine, I guess. But one of the things that we tell people to do is to count the costs and decide mentally before you have to pay the cost that you're going to pay that cost, right? So when you talk about the right mindset, it's just realizing that it's not an option. You're going to execute the routine, so you don't give yourself that mental out of choosing comfort over the effort of executing that routine. And I think that part of that mindfulness is really just deciding that you're going to do it regardless of the momentary and short-term difficulties that may entail. Now, when I talk about that, not all routines are that hard, but it's always harder to go through a work routine than just not to do the work routine at all.
Otherwise, it'd be a habit. So I like that, right? Count the costs. Think about it in advance so that when you're entering into it and you're starting to feel those costs and have to pay those costs, you've already made that decision. Because in the moment, I'm gonna probably optimize for comfort, which isn't going to be to engage the routine. So that mindset on the front end of it really matters. And it makes a big difference on whether or not you're going to be successful with the routine and stick with it, or it's going to be another one of those things that you started and you abandoned.
Yeah, can I add one more bit to that, Brian?
Please.
On the mental side?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So when you think about a routine, you mentioned that habits have a trigger, right? Some kind of a preceding something happens and it triggers a behavior. And that behavior becomes almost automatic. And I want to be clear though, that routines also can have triggers, right? You have a trigger event, you have a trigger in your environment that reminds you to take the routine. So if your routine is a recurring routine, happens at the same time every day, like my 4 a.m. thing, the alarm obviously is going to be a trigger. I typically wake up before the alarm now, but when the alarm goes off, that's when I know I'm up. And it's just immediately my feet go on the floor. So you can still have those kinds of kind of mental bumps to get you to engage with a routine. Triggers still are important. And I know that because one of the things that causes me, and we're going to talk more about this later, but causes me to stop routine is when my environment changes. So, when I used to ride my bike all the time, I was riding my bike 25, 30 miles a day, and which isn't that impressive, but it impressed me. So that's all that matters. But the point is that kept me going because I had this work trigger. After work, I'd just get on my bike and I'd go riding. And then I moved a long way away, and it wasn't as easy to ride. And so that coming home from work trigger didn't work anymore, and I stopped riding my bike. So it's that mental game of deciding before those kind of interruptions happen, you've got a plan to deal with that.
Yeah, love it, love it. I think mindset's everything in life, folks. It really is. So much of life is between the ears, and your success, your routines, all of that. If you don't have the right mindset, you're really going to struggle. And so this is a really critical piece of it, and it's why it's the first step. The second step is pretty simple, but it's really important, and that is block it. Block out time. 12-week year, we're big on time blocking. If you don't physically block time for this, it's not going to happen. And you're going to have to carve out time during your day to fit this routine in, whether it's a 3-minute routine or whether it's an hour routine. Really doesn't matter. If you don't schedule time for it, you're not going to be consistent with it. You're not going to be effective with it. And so very simple step, block it, but it's a critical step because that's how it gets done. So much is driven by your calendar, and the day just comes at you. And if you don't have something to say, no, I got to stop all that for the moment, it's time to do this, then you're just gonna keep taking the day as it comes. So get the right mindset, block it. Step number 3, Michael.
I was looking at another comment, and I just got to share this with you, and I'll talk about step number 3. It was from Andre. He said, when I'm faced with the choice of comfort or routine, I ask, who's in charge here? Right? It's mentally realizing it's not your comfort that's running the show.
Yeah, well, think about that though. For a lot of us, it is. Because why is that? Well, we're wired for comfort. We seek that. We seek what's familiar. We seek what's comfort. That's not a bad thing. I think it's helpful to recognize that we're all wired that way. When you feel that, it's not just you. It's not like, boy, what's wrong with me? Why am I broken? Why are other people, why can they do this stuff so easily? We're all kind of process it the same way in a sense, in that we gravitate towards comfort. We like that. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, or the challenge is, to create certain results in your life, there's heavy lifting involved. And that's where routines really matter. But I like that notion of who's really running the show here, right?
Yeah.
And being conscious about that. That's good.
Yeah. So when we talk about the pre-shot routine, we talk about that in the context of basketball. It's an obvious example. I hope everybody, at least I know with a lot of different countries here, a lot of people don't like basketball, so I'll just kind of fill you in. In the States, in the springtime, there's this annual event called March Madness. And I think it's kind of going to happen this year. It looks like it's going to get pulled off, which I'm excited about. But anyways, what ends up happening is colleges get together and they play games, and they play a tournament, and there's 64 teams. I guess there's 67 or something now, but it used to be 64 teams, and they get down to just 2 teams, and one was the winner. Anyway, the entire season hinges on what you do in that routine. In that tournament, and you'll see kids on the free throw line who have to shoot a foul shot, which means that they get a free shot at the basket and they'll score points if they get it. And that ultimately can change the win or loss of the game, right? So if I hit my free throws, it might be that the game's hanging in the balance. And so there's a lot of pressure potentially on that person shooting that shot. And there's a routine that they go through to kind of make them more centered and more focused so that they're more likely to hit the shot. I'm sorry about that explanation, but I just want to make sure when we talk about a pre-shot routine, we're talking about a routine before you actually begin something, okay? And so the first step of the pre-shot routine is, in our view, is to connect with the purpose of what you're trying to do. What is it that you're there for? What is the purpose of this routine that I'm going to go through, this work exercise that I'm going to go through? And ultimately, that why is the vision very often, but it's the purpose behind the behavior. And connecting with that. Why am I doing this? Because if I'm focused on the outcomes that I want, I'm less focused on the cost of the action, right? So the cost of the action is typically discomfort. But if I can accomplish this action, then what's the outcome I'm after? So we want to focus on the outcome, focus on the why behind the behavior. And the next step then,
can I jump in there, Mike? The other sport that is an obvious pre-shot routine is golf, and whether you're teeing off or whether you're putting, you watch the pros, they all have a pre-shot routine. And when they're standing over the ball to putt it, right? The why is, I need to get this ball in the hole so I can birdie this hole, right? So I can pick up a stroke on the field. I mean, they're constantly connecting with the why every stroke. And especially, for them, they enjoy doing golf, and I enjoy golf as well. Some of these tasks for you might not be as enjoyable as hitting a putt. And so really connecting with that why is important. Connecting it to the bigger win for you, not just why it's important that you do the task, but what that leads to in terms of you living the life you're capable of. All right, you were going on to the second point here on the pre-shot routine.
Yeah. So the second step is to mentally rehearse, right? So if I'm going to be able to perform, I've got to, first of all, be able to kind of in my head see how I do that. So some habits, some habits especially, some behaviors are very easy to take. But the point is that to mentally rehearse the action so that you kind of see yourself doing it before you do it. So, if I have a routine that I want to execute, connect with the why of the routine. And the next thing is really kind of imagining myself executing that routine. So I do that all the time when I get up at 4. I'm always thinking about what's coming next and what I'm going to do right after I do this and that. And that really helps me stay on the routine. But also before I get up, I'm aware of that routine. It's embedded in my head. So I think through that process. And that mental rehearsal increases the odds I'm actually going to execute.
So let's take a couple real world examples. Can we, Mike?
Yeah.
So, so working out, right? Mentally rehearsing that is, I'm going to see myself training in the gym if that's what I'm doing. I'm going to see myself, and I'm going to connect with those feel good emotions that happen when I'm doing that. That's part of the mental rehearsal. It's part of, the why ties into the mental rehearsal, and I start to get those feel good endorphins kicking in just by thinking about it. So I'm seeing myself work out. I'm seeing myself, if it's writing, I'm seeing myself writing a really great chapter or a great paragraph or whatever it is. Or I'm seeing myself making my phone calls and connecting with people and really making a difference for them. Okay, so the practical application of taking that task and actually seeing yourself doing it in a quality way. That's a big piece of this.
That's a great point. Thanks, Brian. Good stuff. And then one of the things that's daunting about a several step routine is you kind of looking at that routine, even if you've kind of mentally gone through it, there's a lot of work involved. And sometimes it can feel in the moment to be overwhelming, right? So don't think about the whole routine. What's the first thing? So commit to the start, right? So we want to actually begin to think about separating the start from the finishing. I can at least start, right? So Brian used to talk about this. That was a great story. You know, one of the favorite coat hangers in most folks' basements or garages, right, was the Nordic Track ski machine, right? We buy them to get in shape, but most of us were just hanging clothes on them. And so one of the things that you want to do with that is to don't commit to getting on a piece of exercise equipment or something like that for 20 minutes. Just commit to walking over to it and getting onto it, standing on the machine, okay? And that's kind of separating the start from the finish. So take the first step and commit to that, and then the next and the next and next will follow. But if you never start, you can never finish. So focus on separating the start from the finish and agreeing that that's at least what you're going to do. You're going to start that routine. And I think it's powerful because once you've got it started, it's easier to take the next step and the next step. As you talk about the mental game, you know, when we imagine all the work we have to do, it's easy not to do. If we just break it into its component pieces and just do one at a time, stay focused on what's next, what's important now, it's easier to stay with routines.
Yeah, again, a practical example of that, right? A lot of people want to write a book, they never write a book, right? When I think about, I've got time blocked out to write, I've got a routine with it. When I'm going into that, I'm thinking about, I'm going to sit down for the time I have, and there's no pressure to write a whole chapter. I might write a sentence, I might write a chapter. It really doesn't matter. In my mind, I'm just going to go write. And so all the pressure is off about finishing. You know, and this works with a lot of tasks. It doesn't have to be a routine task, cleaning the house. The thought of, if your house is really messy and it's a disaster, the thought of cleaning up the whole house is pretty daunting. So you put it off. But what if you said, okay, I'm gonna clean for 15 minutes. I'm gonna start in a room. I don't have to finish. Whatever I get done, but I'm just gonna go stand in this room here. And if I pick up some things and put them away, great. But I'm gonna be in that room for the next 15 minutes. That's the power of separating starting from finishing. And it's really powerful, and it's part of this pre-shot routine. Number 4, then, the last step in creating.
Can I add one more?
You got more to say on that?
Yeah. So
okay.
This is sort of tangentially related to what you were just saying, but you know, when you had talked earlier about you were trying to build these habits, and so you do it for 20, 30, 40 days, but it never became a habit, and so you stopped doing it. And so one of the things that I think happens for a lot of people with routines is I fall off the routine, and then I mentally go back to, okay, I failed, right? I don't believe that I'm going to keep that stuff up. So I feel I beat myself up, but I don't necessarily realize that it's just as easy to get it back on the routine as it was the first time I did it. Now, sometimes those routines, you've built up some physical health, you've built up some mental health, whatever. But the point is that you don't want to climb that mountain again, maybe. But getting back on the routine is the first choice you need to make. So really separating starting the routine again from, you know, just this whole thing of I failed the first time. Just focus on getting started again, coming back, right? Don't get knocked down and stop. Come back and just agree that the first thing I'm going to do is start the new routine again, or the old routine again. I've fallen off routines several times, and they typically happen when I move. I mentioned bike riding. It's also true of getting up at 4 a.m. I moved recently, and all the triggers and all the things that I was doing changed, and so I stopped getting up at 4 o'clock for a while. Got back on track. I had emergency surgery 3 weeks ago, got knocked off again, but I'm back on track again. It's just remembering to get started again, and just focusing on getting started, not the whole routine getting installed immediately.
Yeah, that's good. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too, and on how to maintain them, because that's a big piece of how you maintain, in that sometimes you do stumble. The 4th step then is to learn to find reward and pleasure in completing the task. A lot of the research I've seen is that the people that are most successful with routines and habits find pleasure in the task, not the reward they create for themselves afterwards, not the longer term results it's going to produce, but finding joy in the moment, if you will. And some of these tasks that may be hard to do, but I want you to think about that. I want you to really think about, where's the joy in the moment of doing this? And it may simply be that, hey, I'm following through on something I said was important to me, or I'm exercising personal discipline, or I know this task is part of what it takes for me to be successful, and it's also building my commitment muscle and my follow-through muscle, whatever it is. But find that intrinsic value in the task itself, and it'll be easier to stick to it. You'll be more consistent with it. It'll be less effort. And if there's enough of that there, it may even become a habit for you. because that's again, the habits are the easy ones. They're the things that, are easy to do. And there's also some pleasure in doing it. So 4 simple steps. The right mindset, it starts right there. Block some time for it. Create a pre-shot routine. Think about the why, mentally rehearse it, separate that starting from finishing, and then look for reward and pleasure in the accomplishing, in the completing, in the doing of the task. Good stuff. Mike, anything else before we move on from there?
No.
We're going to talk. Okay, go ahead.
No, it covers most of it.
Okay.
We'll come back to later on.
All right. So we promised you we want to talk about some specific routines. And these are 6 high-performance routines that we employ, that most of the successful people we've known and met and have worked with over the years have similar routines to these, or routines in these areas. And so we're not saying this is the end all be all. It's not the final word on it, but really want you to think about routines in these 6 areas, and specifically these 6 routines, because what we found is that the people that use these routines, they pay big dividends. And what you're going to find is there may be some of them on the list. Some of you may be doing all 6 already. Some of you will see some opportunity for you. So we're going to take these one at a time, kind of unpack them for you a little bit and talk through them. The first one is to really start and end your day. How you start and end your day. Do you have a routine for that? And do you have a routine that starts your day and ends your day in a positive way? So this really came to light for me a couple of years ago. I was with a group, happened to be a group of wholesalers. I don't know, 60, 70 of them in a room. And we were talking about this whole thing about how you start your day. And they were talking about how they start their day. And they were like, yeah, first thing I do when I get up is I pick up my phone, I check the markets. What are the markets doing? What they do overseas, overnight, that kind of thing. And then I check my sales report. And you can see where this is going. And then it just unraveled from there. And I was listening to this and I'm thinking, well, how many of you do that? Virtually every hand went up. And they were all laughing about it because none of them like it. They all find it really frustrating. And so they just said to me, well, how do you start your day? And I said, well, it's a little different than you guys. I said, first thing you need to know, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is I get on the ground and I do crunches. I do that to keep my back healthy. We're on a horse farm. So the next thing I do is I go out and feed the horses. And that's a routine, that stuff happens. But my real morning routine, I separate my work day from my day. And so my morning routine starts, I'm faith-based. Michael is as well. You'll see that in his routines. But I start my day with scripture. I read scripture, and probably 4 or 5 minutes is all I spend there. The next 3 to 5 minutes is in prayer. The next 3 minutes is on affirmations. And that is my morning routine. And when I shared that with them, and then I said on my drive in, I'm always listening to something positive. So it might be a podcast, might be Sirius Radio, listening to somebody or something that's positive though. And they were all laughing out loud because the contrast in those 2 routines and how it literally sets up your day was stark. And it really does make a difference. They're immediately bombarding themselves with all kinds of information that could be positive, could be negative, is going to create emotions for them and take them all over the map. My routine's much more intentional. I'm going to start the day intentionally, and I'm going to set myself up to have my best day. Now, what I described as my routine doesn't have to be your routine, but do you have an intentional routine to start your day that kicks off your day in a positive way, that gets your mind in the right place, that gets you physically in the right place so that you're aligned, you're present, you're ready to go? Mike's touched on his routine a little bit, but it goes further than just getting up at 4 a.m. You mind sharing yours, Mike? Because I think it's helpful when they hear kind of some real life scenarios.
Sure. So there's like broken into 2 to 3 segments, and the reason it's little variables because it depends on when my wife gets up. So there's a little bit of a flexibility to it. But the first piece is that piece I described, which is getting up at 4. By 4:30, I'm ready to go. I've just added a new routine into my morning. So at 4:30, instead of just kind of sitting at the desk and figuring out what I'm going to do, because I've already kind of done it the night before anyway. But what I do is I've got this 7-step routine that I'm adding to my, so the first thing I do is I drink a glass of water. Next thing I do is I do 2 to 3 minutes of aerobic exercise just to get my heart rate up. Then I do about 2 to 3 minutes of stretching. to just kind of get, because I've been sleeping all night. I want to kind of, get the motion going. And then I take about 20 minutes to kind of practice a little bit of mindfulness and just kind of, as Brian said, we're both believers. And so I pray, I talk to the Lord, but it's really just time where I'm lowering my heart rate, lowering my pulse, lowering my breathing rate, breathing more deeply. And I just kind of let myself get centered. And after that, I'm thinking about the successes I've had. What am I really grateful for in my life? What are the happiest moments I've had in my life? And I just dwell on those for a couple of minutes, right? And so that process of thinking through all that gets me in a really good place. And I think about my vision. What am I doing all of this for? Why did I bother to get out of bed at 4 a.m. this morning? And so I spent some time with my vision. And again, just a few minutes thinking through what's important to me now and what's really, really connecting with me in terms of what's important. So I do all that, and then ultimately it's just a matter of getting started. So there's a 30-minute routine of getting out of bed and getting ready. Then there's a 30-minute routine that I've just added to kind of get myself really ready for the day. Before I start into the work, it's more of the tuning the machine up a little bit. Then my third routine, real quickly, is when my wife gets up, then we spend time in the Word and we do some praying together and reading the Bible together. And that can vary depending upon when she gets up. She doesn't have a hard and fast start time for her day. So I have to be a little bit flexible. And that's what I was talking about before. Don't get so rigid that your routines can't handle changes in the environment, because guess what? The world changes, the environment changes, lots of change going on, and it's speeding up. So just being able to be flexible, hold it lightly, still get the stuff done you want to get done, but don't necessarily get bound up. Oh, step 2 didn't happen, so I'm done, because that's a waste of mental energy.
Yeah, and then think about how you end your day, right? Does your day end intentionally again, or are you just falling into bed? So, and again, these routines don't have to be long. If you look at Mike's routine, and you go, oh, 30 minutes is way too much. All right, create a 5-minute routine, but just be intentional about it. How are you starting and ending your day in a positive way? The end of my day is really simple. When I laid my head on my pillow, I ask myself, what are 2 or 3 things that I'm grateful for from today? And it's just a way to kind of recap my day in a positive way, set me up for a good night's sleep, and position me so in the morning I'm back. I'm positive in the morning. I'm positive throughout the day. I'm positive on how I end my day. I'm not going to focus and dwell on the things that didn't go well, because there are things that happen every day that if I focused on them would make me miserable. Right? Not everything goes my way. Things I hear in the news, things that are happening to friends, health scares, all kinds of things happen that if I focused on those, I could be gripped by those and it really spiral down. So really simply, that's probably a 2-minute routine I have. If Judy and I go to bed at the same time, we'll do it out loud with one another. So what's 1 or 2 things you're grateful for today? And we'll talk about those. And it's a bonding time for us as well. But again, I'm not saying you have to have that routine, but I really want to impress upon you what you need a productive routine to start your day and to end your day. All right, I saw a question in there. Is it Lonnie says, to be intentional, do you have to write them down? Even the prayer part, exercise, meditation. If you're asking, do I have to write them down to begin the routine, it might be helpful to kind of sketch out what my routine looks like. And I think that's what you're asking. Yeah, so it can be really helpful, especially if there's a couple parts to it, like Michael's, until he's been into that routine, a bit of the stretching and the you might want to have the list of those things. But again, keep it simple. It's not going to hurt to write it down, for sure. There you go.
So yeah, writing it down is just a great way, as you said, Brian, to kind of remember what comes next. But once it becomes sort of part of your routine, that's what a routine is. It really doesn't require a lot of mental effort to know. It takes some effort to do it, but it doesn't take any effort to really remember it. Somebody asked me about the 3 elements again, just real quickly. I have a rise and wake. I have that kind of the stretching and aerobic and mindfulness thing. And then I do the prayer time with my wife. The third one varies depending on when she gets up. Those are my 3 routines.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Now, I mentioned this, how you start the day. There's another routine for how you start and end the workday. And we think it's really important, and the people we've worked with that are successful think it's really important to separate the two, because work is just part of your day. It isn't your day. And so the way those other folks were starting their day, it's immediately consuming their day. And by the way, that wasn't just in the morning, that bled over into the evenings, took time away from their family, as you might well imagine. And maybe some of you have experienced that. So I want you to be mindful and intentional about starting the workday. It doesn't start the minute your feet hit the ground. That's your routine to start your day. You should have a definite start time to your day. Now to your workday, that may vary depending on the day, but the night before you want to determine when you start your workday. And what's the routine when you come in? Are you drawn immediately to emails? Are you in the middle of chaos? Or is it more controlled? Right? What is the routine to start that day? Is it productive? Does it put you in a positive space work-wise? And so for me, the first thing I start with is my longer term vision. I just spend a couple minutes on my longer term vision. What I want my life, what I want my business, what I want to have happen. My next thing is I go to my weekly plan, because that's the stuff that matters most. I do all of that before I ever go to an inbox, before I listen to voicemails, before I field any questions from anyone, any of that stuff. It's a very short routine, but it kicks off my workday in a way that I know I'm purposeful that day. At the end of the day, I wrap it up pretty similar. I check back in with my weekly plan, and I think back through the vision, and I even kind of think about, okay, how productive was I today? Was this a good day? A scale of 1 to 10, how would I rate my workday? And it's not a lot of pressure there, just was it a productive day or not? Now, again, you don't have to make that your routine, but I want you to have a routine for how you start your workday and how you end your workday. It's very different than how you start your day and how you end your day. And right now, it may be even more important because so many people are officing out of the home. And for some of you, you're homeschooling and you never really signed up to homeschool. And you've got all this extra dynamic in the mix. And so a lot of things are bleeding over. There's blurred lines. The more you can kind of say, okay, here's where I start my workday, here's where I end my workday. I think especially now with working at home like we are with the kids and everything, it's going to just help you so much. Be focused in the work, right? Be present when you're in the work, be present when you're home.
Yeah.
What do you want to add to that, Mike?
Well, just I can't say enough about the end of day routines too, because what they give me is permission to stop. I've got them scheduled, just like I do the morning. I've got the afternoon scheduled, and at this time I stop. So I get up at 4. I'm done with work at 4. Right. So I don't work past 4. And by 3:30, I'm already shutting down, and I do an after action review. Like you kind of did, how did today go? What were some of the learning points? So I'll do an after action review, and then I'll set up my agenda for the next day. I just kind of lay out my I'll print out my calendar, and I put all the stuff I'm going to need to get that stuff done on my desk. So everything's just like there. And all I do is sit down and start when I'm ready. So but the end of the day routine at work really helps me do is to leave the office. So, sleep is so important. And, when you get up at a certain time in the morning, you got to make sure you're going to bed at the concomitant time so that you're setting yourself up to be healthy and energetic. If you're burning the candles at both ends, if you're getting up earlier and staying up later, that's a recipe for crashing, right? So take care of the body, take care of the machine that's doing the work, which is you, by getting enough sleep. So I'm really careful to end my day at the same time. And then in the evening, outside of the work shutdowns, I to tell you this, but because I get up at 4, I start to get ready for bed at about 7. I'm kind of ready to go to bed by 7:30, and I'm no later than 8 o'clock. I'm sleeping, and I've got some things that I'm doing to get ready. So I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. So I go to bed early, but I do that because I'm much more productive at certain times of the day than I am at other times. Some people are night owls. So, biologically, people have different sort of diurnal rhythms. And so if you work late, then set yourself up so that you're getting enough sleep and just align your day around how you normally operate. But those end of day routines, Brian, I think they're so powerful because it gives you permission to let go. Right? If you don't have a stopping point, you're just going to keep going and it's going to burn you out.
Yeah, I see a lot of people, they're answering emails late at night and they're catching up work here, catching up there. That, we've talked about this before. There will always be more to do than you have time to do it. So having a distinct stop is really important because work is part of life. It's not life. And one more thing and one more thing and one more thing, and pretty soon you're the hamster on the wheel. You're not living a life of abundance. You're not living a life of significance. You're not having an impact. So yeah, end your day. All right, the third one then is the 12-week year. And because you're part of community, you're familiar with this, but the 12-week year is in and of itself a routine. It's a routine to help you execute more effectively, and there's a cadence to it. And so if you're not applying the pieces of it, I really want you to think about how you might incorporate the routine of the 12-week year. And so part of that is, the first piece of that is really starting with a vision, right? Being clear on what that vision is, staying connected to it. Part of the 12-week year routine is having a set of 12-week goals and a tactical plan every 12 weeks. So you don't start a 12-week year without a tactical plan, without specific goals, without a focus plan, right? That's part of the routine. That's part of the rhythm, the cadence of how you work. You're connected to this vision. There's a plan. The goals align with that longer-term vision. You can see that connection. You can make the connection from the longer-term vision all the way to the actions or the tactics in the plan. Then within that, there's a weekly routine, an execution routine. We're going to talk about that one separately. So there's a nested routine in that that helps you work the plan week in and week out, day in and day out. And then there's a 12-week review and planning process, which includes an after-action review. So every 13th week, you take some time out. You look back over the last 12 weeks. What worked, what didn't work, right? Where were my assumptions on? Where were they off? And we're kind of looking back to learn. As you know, the 12-week year is a guilt-free zone. We can't change the past, but we can look back and learn from that and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what's different now? Going to reconnect with the vision. And now that's where I'm going to set my next set of goals. So I'm going to lock and load there again. So every 13 weeks, there's this review and then setting up for the next 12 weeks. It's almost like what we're doing on a daily basis, right? Reviewing the day and then setting up the next morning. Same thing here, only on a 12-week year basis. And then really being clear about what I'm going to pursue the next 12 weeks, building some momentum around that. In addition to that, we're going to take some time, we're going to celebrate. So whether you hit your goal or not, you made some progress. The progress might be your mindset has started to shift. You might see some actions start to shift. Some of the results are coming online, maybe not as strong as you want, or maybe you crushed your goals. Really doesn't matter. But we're going to have you celebrate the progress and the success. Because one, it creates energy, it creates momentum. Two, it creates focus. And if you're part of a team, it also creates culture. So there's the 12-week year routine, and there's pieces to it. There's steps to it. If you're missing any one of those steps, really want to encourage you to incorporate that step. And what makes this routine a little interesting is at this point, it's not a daily routine, right? You're not, the plan is something you redo every 13 weeks. The review and planning session is something that's done every 13 weeks. So a piece of this routine is not a daily thing. But what you're going to want to do, if you remember about how we create a routine, is we block out time for it. So you'll see it in our organization. We've got time blocked out every 13th week to go off-site. We used to do it physically. Right now, we're doing it remotely. But literally, we carve out 2 days to do the review and do the planning and to celebrate our success. And that is calendarized for us. So every 13 weeks, we know that's coming. That's part of our cadence. It's part of the rhythm and routine of how we work. Anything you add to that, Mike, or you want to take on the weekly execution routine?
I'll take on the weekly execution routine. I like what you said. So, it's kind of like there's nested routines. There's this 12-week routine, right? And then there's a weekly routine. The weekly routine, the weekly execution routine is a set of events and tools that really kind of help you stay on track with the execution of your plan. You guys have seen this before, so I won't go too detailed into that. But on Monday morning, I don't give myself permission for the week to start without printing out a weekly plan. So I've got my weekly plan that includes the tactics that are due in the current week for me to hit my goal. And if I missed anything in the previous week, I'll add that in too, but I'll have a plan for the week. And I don't let my week start without this. So the first thing is I start the week with a weekly plan. And then every day that I'm in that week, I start the day by looking at the plan, what I got done yesterday, kind of what Brian was talking about, and what needs to get done today. And now I've set myself up, we're preparing that for the day before, but in the morning, you want to reconnect with that, right? So in the beginning of the day, you're going to check into what needs to happen today, maybe block out for it, as Brian talked about. At the end of the day, then we review what got done, what didn't get done. And given that, what does that mean for tomorrow? And so all of that kind of routine of checking in, calendarizing, checking in again at the end of the day, and then doing that again. So there's this weekly routine, starting the week with a plan, and then each day I've got a routine, right? And at the end of the week, then I score my execution. So the second part of that weekly routine is I score my execution for the week. How well did I execute? How many tactics did I get done over the number that was supposed to get done, right? The percentage of tactics that got done, I score that. And then I also score my progress, right? So I'm looking at, the actions I'm taking should be paying off, right? So I should have some lead and some lag indicators showing up that represent progress. So start the week with a plan, end the week with evaluating how well I executed that plan. And then before the next week starts, I go to a weekly accountability meeting with Brian. We meet together every week as a company at 9 a.m. And we go through a weekly accountability meeting where we talk about what got done, what didn't, and given that, what we're going to do this week as a result of what happened last week. So we're always executing from our 12-week plan, but we're paying attention throughout each week, and it allows us to adjust week to week to week to get back on track or to keep going. So that daily routine feeds that weekly routine. So the weekly execution routine, again, is start the week with a weekly plan. At the end of the week, score your execution and score your progress. Attend a WHAM every week. Those three things. If you're doing that and really engaging with that, you're gonna be much more likely to be with the execution routine over the long run, the 12-week year over the long run, and you're much more likely to stay on track with hitting your goals. If you just kind of haphazardly do that stuff, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, it really puts your goals at risk.
Yeah, unlike the first two where we're saying, hey, you don't have to adopt our routine, find a routine. With these two, we're saying adopt this specific routine. Why? Because it's been proven over the last couple of decades to drive tremendous results in every area of your life. And you know that to some degree, or you wouldn't be on this call, you wouldn't be part of our community. But what we see with a lot of our clients is that over time, they stop doing this and they stop doing that. So go back and look at, are you applying the 12-week year routine? Are you applying this weekly execution routine? And where can you tighten that up a little bit? Because just a few little tightening here and there can make a big difference in terms of the results you get and the fulfillment you have. All right, there's two other areas and they're related. And I want to talk about Keystone Action at work. And then Michael, I'll let you grab the Keystone Action personal. But I want you to think about an activity or a series of activities at work that you find difficult, but would have a powerful effect on your business or your career if you could get yourself to do them consistently. Sort of the thing I talked about earlier that I tried to turn into a habit. And maybe you've tried to do that. Again, maybe it's writing for you, or if you're in sales, maybe it's prospecting, making those calls, or whatever it is for you. But I want you to think about one action in your business, and we call it a keystone action because it's an action that, not all actions are equal. Some actions are more important, more powerful. It's that 80-20 scenario again, right? What are one of those actions that are one of the powerful actions that if you could create a routine around that would have you performing it more consistently, would have an impact on your results and your fulfillment? I want you to identify one of those actions right now. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think that through, but I want you to think about, and it probably won't even take that. I mean, you should be able to know what that is like that. It's an action that has a big effect, but that you're probably inconsistent with it, and maybe you struggle to do it. I want you to write that down in your handout somewhere. Got a couple folks posting it up, prospecting clients. Yeah, that's a challenging one. Dealing with email, good one. Okay. Yeah, so I want you to think about that, right? Make my phone calls to check in. Yeah, what is it for you? What's that one action, that keystone action? Not the only action you take, but a keystone action is the one action that is probably the most powerful action, and it has this effect of bringing the others along with it. We've talked about this before when we talk about commitments, but if you can identify that keystone action and we create a routine around that, then it's gonna increase your results dramatically. So what I want you to do is after this, we're going to take that action. You're going to go back to how you create a routine with that, the right mindset, scheduling it, your pre-shot routine. So you're going to have to think about what's the pre-shot routine you need to get into that activity. And then as you're doing it, finding the reward and the pleasure as you're doing it. And we're going to try this with one. There may be a couple that come to mind for you that you think about, hey, you know what? There's 2 or 3 right now that if I could If I could make them routines and be consistent with them, would be really impactful in my business. That's great. Identify those. When we're done here, we're gonna have you pick one though to start with. And once you build that into routine, you build that muscle of following through and the consistency with it, then you can pick off another one. All right, similar thing then with personal, Mike.
Sure. So I have a keystone action. I mentioned it, but it's powerful. So I want to come back to it for a minute. It's powerful for me because it kicks off everything else. And so a good keystone action is something that triggers a set of actions that follow it, almost not automatically, because that would be like a habit, but you know the sequence and you follow. If the keystone action happens, you're much more likely to follow that routine. So for me, my keystone action personally, and I do this whether I'm at work or not, so this sounds like it's personal or business, but it's actually personal. My keystone action is that getting my feet on the floor. As soon as that alarm goes off, it's not like I'm awake, okay, I did it. My feet have to be on the floor, right? So that action, putting my feet on the floor, just triggers the rest of this stuff for me. And I want to be clear about that keystone action. That's kind of boring, but it's a mental place I go to, right? So in my head, I said, I did it again. I don't know what else is going to happen today, but I started it off with excellence, right? And so that mental place I go to is so positive. It kind of kicks in everything else I'm going to do. And I begin to reframe all my actions in that morning routine. Because I do this on Saturday as well. So I take one day off Sunday. I don't get up on Sunday. It's my treat. But on Saturday, I do the same thing. I'm not working, but I get that same routine going, and it triggers the other stuff. So that keystone action is so important for you to identify. It's the thing that really gets you moving, right? And for me, that it's such a simple thing, but I've made it more than what it is. In my head, it means so much more. It means like, I did it again. And so I start my day with a success wave. And I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's something I recognize as being so integral to everything else I'm going to do that it really does have that value for me.
You know, for some of you, it might be working out. Maybe you've tried to work out consistently for a long time and tried to habitize that. That's our new word today. And it hasn't worked. So maybe that's where you build a routine, or maybe it's spending time with the family. That again, maybe you're one of those folks that just been working too much and bringing work home, and there's really no quality time with the family. So what would that look like? But again, I want you to pick one action in your personal life that would have an effect on some area of your life, your relationships, your health, your happiness, your fitness, somewhere in there. And again, identify one of those, because what you'll see is successful people learn how to create routines around these keystone actions. And as you advance in your career, as you take new ground, sometimes these keystone actions shift, right? If your role changes, the keystone actions will be a different set of actions. On the personal side, if I'm doing really well here, I might want to focus over here, something like that. So learning how to identify that core action, that keystone action, and then learning how to put a routine behind it is really key to your success. And you're going to find that's going to really accelerate your success as you start to build routines around these. A few, right? Not every activity is a keystone activity. Not every activity needs a routine, but a few of these things can make a big difference in the outcomes in your life.
Yeah. So that's a great point, Brian. So don't get too caught up in the definition, but my keystone action that I talked about drove the productive actions later on. But you're right. The keystone action really isn't that momentary bump I get in the morning. I'm doing that because it causes me to do the things that are really important, building relationships. So my wife and I have a ritual in the morning where we're together for half an hour. We read the Bible, we pray, we talk about what's going on in the day. Those things, and it starts with reading the Bible. That I would say that Bible reading is a keystone action. So it's a trigger action in the morning that gets me to that Bible reading. So I don't want to get too far off the conversation here, but finding what works for you, finding what drives that, and those keystone actions, if they happen, then everything else seems to follow, like you pointed out.
Yeah. I'm noticing the clock. We're about out of time, but because of the technological issues, we started a little late. There's a few more things we want to cover. If you've got to go, thanks for joining us. You'll get a link for the recording. You can catch up on the end of that. But we're gonna finish out here probably 5 or 10 more minutes. All right. So those are 6 habits we really want you to think about installing these in your life if you don't have them. How you start and end each day, how you start and end your work day, the 12-week year routine, did I call them habits? 6 high performance routines. The weekly execution routine, a routine around one activity in your business that's a meaningful keystone action, one activity in your personal life that's a keystone action. And again, you probably have some of these, so you're not starting from scratch, but I really want you to think about these 6 areas in particular can make a profound difference in the terms of the outcomes in your life, the impact you're having, the joy and fulfillment that you're experiencing. All right, so it's one thing to create a routine. It's a whole nother thing to maintain it. And so we want to just give you some insights on how do you maintain a routine, because great, hopefully we've got you motivated, excited to start a routine or 2 here. Let's talk about how you maintain them. And you can take notes here. The first Mike touched on earlier, which is commit to the routine. There's a difference between interest and commitment. If you're just interested in doing this thing and you're going to do it when circumstances permit, you're not going to be successful with it. You're going to have to make an upfront commitment, which, as Mike touched on earlier, involves you really thinking about what's the cost, right? What am I going to have to give up? What am I going to have to sacrifice in order to be successful and consistent with the routine? And that's where a lot of these break down. We don't think about what the sacrifice is, right? That going to the gym, what am I going to have to do? Well, I'm not going to be able to just flop on the couch. I'm going to have to do it after work when I'm losing energy, or I'm going to have to get up early, or whatever there's but a cost to doing those actions consistently, whether it's sitting down and writing, whether it's making your phone calls, whatever it is. So think through those and then really commit to the routine. This is why we're really suggesting you kind of work on one or a couple routines at a time, not a bunch of them, because it's going to take some effort. Remember, any routine, it's easier to stop or not do than it is to do it. And so the second piece of that then is if you incorporate it into existing routine. So I think, Michael, I don't know if your Bible reading came before your coffee with Kristen, or if you were already having coffee with Kristen and you guys decided to add the Bible reading to it and some of the conversation, but that would be an example of kind of piggybacking a routine. So I've got this routine of my wife and I sit down every morning for 15 minutes, and I really want to start reading the Bible as an example. That's Mike's example. And so we just incorporate that routine. We piggyback it on the routine we already have. Anytime you can piggyback a routine on another routine, there's a greater likelihood you'll stick with it, because that other routine is rolling. You've been doing it. You've got some consistency with it. My piggybacking, having Gabby work out with me, right? Piggybacks quality time with my daughter on a routine I had of working out. Go ahead, Mike.
Real quickly.
Yeah.
So even more powerful in some cases than piggybacking a routine on a routine is piggybacking a routine on a habit. Because to be honest with you, coffee is a habit I have. It's a habit.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what else is going wrong in my day. I'm having a cup of coffee. So that drove the time with my wife and all that stuff. So if you have a habit, you can piggyback off, because that's
better. Yeah, I like it. Even better. All right, buddy system, Mike, talk about that one.
So one of the things that is interesting for us, and it's really a powerful tool in the 12-week year with the weekly accountability meetings, is that when you join up and you share accountability with somebody else, they don't hold you accountable, but you each of you take personal accountability to do something, and you kind of check in with each other. And sometimes we worry more about what other people think about us than we worry about how we think about ourselves. So we give ourselves huge passes, but our accountability buddy doesn't give us huge passes. They don't see our intention. They just see, did we do what we said we were going to do? And that's a really powerful motivator, because I don't want to let my buddy down or make them think, hey, I'm a slacker. So because I'm with this accountability buddy, there's a psychological reason that accountability buddies really help you to stay on your path. So, and the benefits to accrue to both parties, right? So both people in this buddy relationship typically can execute more effectively. So find a buddy that you want to commit to with about getting your particular routine. An exercise routine is a great example. Having an exercise buddy gets you to the gym, because you don't want to leave that person hanging and you're not there, right? So having a buddy to do something that you might not otherwise do really increases this kind of performance. And there was a interesting study, or it wasn't a study, it was a book I read, but they said if you want to get up in the morning, you can have a buddy system with your newborn. Don't put the alarm clock next to your bed. Put the alarm clock in your newborn's room. because you're motivated when not every kid wake up. Not quite the same thing, but when we engage with other people, it typically causes us to behave in a way that we might not other if we're just doing it on our own.
Okay, and then here's the other piece of maintaining a routine is that, listen, there will be times when you potentially stumble, right? Mike had mentioned a couple times when his physical environment changed, he got off his routine. And so don't be shocked by that. Don't give up when that happens. That's all part of the process. So it's really about getting back on as quick as you can. So if you stumble, a couple thoughts here. One is to reconnect with the why. Don't lose sight of that. Go back to why this routine is important, the things that it does for you, how you benefit from it, how the people around you benefit from it, right? Think about the morning routine. I start out the day positive, how that not only benefits me, but it benefits the people around me. Start back today. Too many of us think, oh, we'll start on Monday. Everything starts on Monday. Nothing ever starts. Start back the day you realize you've gotten off the routine, start back. And then this notion of focus on starting, that was Mike touching on that earlier about the starting versus finishing. You don't think about how long am I going to do this routine? Is this going to go on for the rest of my life? That seems daunting. Just focus on, I'm going to start this routine today. And even if it's a little messed up, maybe I was supposed to start my morning routine when I got up and I skipped it and it's now 11 a.m. That's all right. I'm going to go back through it. I'm going to start right now. I'm not going to wait till tomorrow. So that's a really good practice to get into when you fall off anything, is to start it immediately, as quick as you can, get back on it. So commit to the routine, piggyback it, stack it, whatever you want to call that. Buddy system helps. And then don't be surprised if you stumble. Be prepared for when you stumble. Start back that day, connect with the why, focus on starting again. Anything else on that, Mike?
Yeah, the thing about stumbling is we can beat ourselves up. One of our clients had been an alcoholic that had recovered, had been off alcohol for 20 years. And there was an event that happened, and for various reasons, I'll go all the details, he had a drink, and then he had another drink, and he had another drink, and he talked to us about how terrible that was, that that he was back right where he started. And we really worked to reframe his thinking about, look, you were free for 20 years. So does that 1 week or 2 weeks define you, or does the 20 years define you? And so don't go to the place where you fail and hate yourself for the failure, because and this is an extreme example, but it's powerful. Now we're not responsible for this, but he came back a few months later and said, you're absolutely right. And he was back sober again. And so the point is that don't focus on the failure, focus on the success you have to get restarted, to get reconnected with it. Because if you could do it for 20 years, you can do it for the next 20 years.
Yeah, and if you could do it for 10 days, right? You can do it for the next 10 days. I love that, Mike. Focus on the success you had with it, however big or small it was. All right, so here we are. Everything we do is designed to help you drive higher performance through more effective execution. So if we go through this and you don't do anything with it, then it's a lot of learning that is pretty well worthless. So it's time for you to act. Time for you to think about, what routine or a couple routines do you want to focus on over the next 12 weeks? The 6 we talked about, right? Which one's in those? And again, you might want to do all 6. I'd recommend 2 or 3 to start with. And you can always add more as you get rolling. But I'd like you to identify in the handout there the routines that you want to start with. What are you going to start to build a routine around? Take the learning you have from today, walk that out. Be prepared that it's not going to be perfect, right? It's not going to run smooth. It's going to be a little bumpy. That's okay. That's part of the process. But I think if you use what we've learned today, the notion of how you create a routine, how you maintain a routine, right? I think you're going to find you're going to be really successful with it. And the impact is all the things you're looking for, from greater success to better relationships to healthy, abundant living. And so, Mike, any closing thoughts as we wrap this up?
I think we covered most of it. We did, like you said, we recorded this. If you want to go back and take a look at some of the things that you may have missed, encourage you to do that. I think like anything else, Brian and I are all about execution. We want you to get more of the right things done more consistently. And where you can apply routines to get those things done. They take less energy and they pay back more in results. And so routines are a productivity hack, to coin a phrase. And so identify areas in your life where you can put in a routine, get better results, and then go for it and experiment. There's not one right way of doing things. It's finding a way that works for you.
Yeah, I love it. Keep us posted on how you're doing. If we can help any more, we're always here for that. Thanks for being part of the community. Keep an eye out next month for the series. And I don't even know what the topic is. Next time we'll be more mindful of that. We'll have our routine down a little better. We'll improve the routine. But thanks for being with us. Thanks for being part of the community. Really hope you've gotten value out of our session today. Go out there, work on these routines. And as always, have a great 12-week year, everybody. Thanks for being here.